Subscriber and Wavy here. Today you got this one right here, the most overrated and most underrated boss in every Souls game. Let's react it.
So, I went back and forth for a while on whether to do a best and worst boss in every Souls game video, but in the end, I've decided not to. I mentioned this before, but I really try not to repeat content on this channel, and having already done a top 12 best and a top 12 worst bosses video, there's no way this wouldn't end up being very repetitive. So I thought I'd spin it in a different direction. I will still be doing the community ranking of JK Leeds subscribers and what they think the best and worst boss in every game is, but for me, I want to talk about underrated and overrated bosses in each game. Now, before I go any further, I just want to state this. I actually really dislike the terms overrated and underrated. Saying something is overrated implies there's some kind of objective measure here, but again, it's all just opinion. So why did I use them for this video if I don't like them? Well, unfortunately on YouTube, this is the terminology people would use for this kind of topic. So here it is, but let me define exactly what I mean very clearly by underrated and overrated. Underrated means a boss most people don't really like that much, but I actually think is quite good. And overrated is a boss that a lot of people really like, but doesn't really do it for me and I don't care for it. There is no objective measurement really, it's all personal preference when it comes down to it. Sure, I could have a title like a boss I like which everyone doesn't like and a boss I don't like but everyone likes from every Souls game, but that is
but that's a weird title, yeah.
Way too wordy. So here we go. A boss I like that popular opinion doesn't, and a boss I don't like that popular opinion does from every Souls game. Which bosses do you like that most people don't, or vice versa? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to support my wordy titles and overly long intros, hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to be notified of any new vids dropping. Sometimes browsing the internet can feel like being in the frigid outskirts, wandering around with no visibility and getting attacked without warning. But what if you could have a large club to
Bad Dark Souls 2 DLC was disgusting.
strike down these attacks?
I hate that area.
Well, we can't give you a literal large club, but we can give you a figurative one to help protect your privacy. NordVPN is the best VPN out there with over 5,400 servers in 59 countries and the ability to work on 6 different devices. I don't say this lightly, but if you don't get NordVPN, angry crystal reindeer may jump out of your computer screen and repeatedly hit you with a wide hitbox charge attack that you will not be able to dodge, followed by smashing your furniture and saying generally insulting things to you in their reindeer language.
Bro, just kill the one stat in Dark Souls 2 which gives you more iframes while rolling. It's insane.
Okay, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but if you want to protect your internet privacy and get a massive discount on a 2-year plan with NordVPN, go to nordvpn.com/jkleeds to protect your internet privacy from hackers and probably reindeer gangs as well. So let's start with Demon Souls. For me, my choice for underrated is Leechmonger. I see this guy getting shoved into a lot of worst Souls series bosses lists, and while I agree he is pretty easy and maybe not the most interesting design, I actually think he fits in perfectly for the level that he's in. If 5-1 had a difficult boss, this would be one of the worst levels to ever exist because the boss run back here is crazy. But because Leechmonger provides a little challenge, but overall isn't going to wall you brutally, it provides just the right amount of tension when fighting him without feeling unfair. There still is a chance you could die, but if you do, you'll likely get him on the next go. I like Leech.
For me, an underrated fight is just the Phalanx, just because of the theme. Like, I kind of like it. I don't know. Yeah, like many people think, yeah, it's kind of boring and a useless boss fight, I guess. But in my opinion, it was one of the greater ones.
Leechmonger because it's one of the few examples of a boss run back level done perfectly without causing agonizing frustration. At least for me. As for overrated boss, I've seen a lot of people mentioning Flame Lurker as one of the best bosses in the game. I've even seen him put as the #1 boss in Demon Souls, and I don't really understand why. Maybe it's because of playing the other games first, but his moveset just seems very basic, and I just don't find the fight that interesting. I know you might say, well, it's the first game, so cut him
I think it's simple but good. I could agree with Flame Lurker.
slack, but just to be clear,
or the end boss.
I don't think he's a bad boss or anything, but people saying that he's a better boss than, for example, Force King Alant, I just don't see how. His design is okay.
Oh, I like Alant more, to be honest. Yeah.
But I don't find it especially exciting. He's somewhere in the middle for me when it comes to bosses. Not terrible, but not amazing. Not deserving of the praise that I've seen lobbied towards him in many videos. Let's move on to Dark Souls 1. A boss I really like, which popular opinion says is kind of rubbish, is the Gaping Dragon. I'll be honest, a good chunk of this is because of how cool I think his design is. The reveal as he slowly climbs into the arena is awesome, and it's a terrifying moment in the early stages of Dark Souls 1. His enormous mouth body is absolutely horrific to look at. Is the fight the most mechanically intricate? No, maybe not. but to have this
Just the
guy as
theme
your
is
first
nice,
dragon fight really sets Dark Souls apart from other medieval fantasy RPGs. It does have a couple of neat aspects, such as the tiny head taking more damage and also cutting off the tail giving you a weapon. You also need to ensure you take out the channeler above him before the fight or you're in for a bad time. Although he's optional, I do always take the time to come down to the depths to fight him whenever I do a Dark Souls 1 run through. Fun fact, a picture of this guy was actually my desktop background for years after playing Dark Souls 1. Now for a boss which a lot of people love, but I don't really care for. I gotta go with Gwyn here, I'm afraid. Yes, I know lore-wise he is incredible and I love the legendary music, but I'm just not that keen on the fight itself. It goes from either being a complete joke when you parry him, to being insanely hard due to his recovery speed and attacks with barely any tells. Feels like he's too fast for this game if you fight him normally. There's basically no opportunity to heal. Anytime you try this, his AI reads your input
For me, it was a bit too easy.
and strikes you down too quickly for you to respond. But parrying just makes him so easy it's unreal. It's actually kind of pitiful watching him fall to this, but
Yeah, the parry time is like pathetic.
maybe
It's
that's
easy.
the point. You can also slap on Havel's armor and have a pretty easy time. Overall, I don't think this is balanced well and feels a little underwhelming for the final boss of the game. Dark Souls 2 is our next entry, and I'm going to go for a super controversial entry for Underrated, Blue Smelter Demon. That's right. Now I know what you're thinking.
Blue
How
Smelter
could you
Demon?
possibly like this reskin boss? Well, let
Blue
me say
Smelter
first
Demon?
and foremost,
Bro,
I'm not
this is just like the red one, but in blue. And that's it.
factoring the boss run back into this opinion. Boss run back is horrible. We all know it. Let's move on. I'll
Yeah,
also
most
say
of them
my
are
opinion
horrible.
here does come from fighting him on my no leveling run. So what separates this guy from the red smelter demon? Well, he does magic damage instead of fire damage, of course, but he also has the ability to delay the attacks. I found the delayed attacks adding some variety and intensity to the combat. I found staying close to him and dodging his swings actually really fun, and in the final phase is a combination of a mad dash to take him down while also ensuring to top your health up. Did he
Okay,
have
to
some
each
pretty
their own.
awful looking hitboxes at times when I was fighting him? Of course, but I had really low
I
adaptability
think the fight was decent, not that bad, not that good, but well-rounded, I guess.
on this run, and these hitboxes are there with basically every boss because of the way they're designed. I'm not going to go out my way to say he's one of the best bosses in the series or anything like that, but I did genuinely find this a fun and thrilling fight. As for Overrated, I can't really say there's any here that is generally
Yep.
loved that I don't like, but I do see a lot of people praising the Pursuer, and while I don't
What?
think he's terrible, I don't think he's a top tier boss. I probably felt differently the first time
I think everyone loved the Fume Knight or Sir Alon.
I played Dark Souls 2 as I really struggled against him initially. But the problem is, once you figure out the walk around to the right strategy with him, it pretty much negates any danger and any tension that you might get from this fight, as you can easily avoid almost anything he does. I love his floating movement, and he looks really intimidating, but this one aspect really takes this one down for me. Again, I don't dislike him, but I've seen a bunch of lists putting this guy in the top 5 bosses in Dark Souls 2, and I just think there are many better.
To be honest, the Pursuer gives me more of a rival vibe. Because you encounter him like multiple times around Dark Souls 2 and it's nice, man.
Quick
More
question,
of a mini boss, I guess.
what's Havel's favourite music? Rock. Like dad jokes? Like Dark Souls dad jokes? How about subscribing to my channel? You know you wanna. Okay, Bloodborne. So I'll start with the generally liked boss that I'm not a big fan of, which is Orphan of Kos. Many people
This is generally liked? What the hell?
commented on my best boss video asking how I could leave him
No, it was Mario or
off. And you'll probably think the reason he doesn't make the cut is kind of weird. It's actually the music. Music for me is actually something I value pretty highly with boss fights, and the music for all the other bosses in the DLC is insanely good, especially Ludwig and Lady Maria. Orphan of Kos by comparison feels really underwhelming. It's very ambient for the most part. It does pick up a little towards the end, but doesn't come close to the highs that the other boss themes reach. I'm also less interested
Yeah, people are just so hyped about this because he's so hard, I guess. I don't know.
in this guy design-wise than I am for Ludwig, for example, even though Orphan's weapon is pretty unique. The fight is very challenging and definitely intense. Again, I'm certainly not saying this boss is bad by any stretch. Let me state that this is a fantastic boss, but those couple of small things keep it out of my personal higher rankings. As for Underrated, I think Cleric Beast is actually an awesome first boss. Okay, so technically he's optional and not the first boss, but I guarantee most people will encounter this guy before.
Yeah, the
Fourth.
Cleric Beast boss fight is good, but there's just one problem. It is like with any beast boss, is when your camera just gets stuck into him. Like, it's fucking weird.
Father Gascoigne. This giant beast jumping down onto the breach to face you is a terrifying moment for a new player. It's like a more intense version of the Asylum Demon from Dark Souls 1.
Yep,
It really sets
can
the scene
agree.
for what's to come in the game with
I was a victim.
its beastly
Took me like nine tries, I guess.
appearance
Yeah,
and screaming,
something like
and
that.
helps you get used to mechanics like parry and breaking limbs, which are going to be crucial later on. I like this guy and feel maybe he doesn't get enough credit for being the first big beast boss in the game. Large scary monsters jumping down on you is all good in my book. Well, Dark Souls 3 is here. For underrated, I'm going to go with a very strange choice. Half-Light Spear of the Church. I'm mainly talking about the AI version as opposed to fighting another player.
Good one. This is like one of the most unique boss fights out there in the Soul series, besides the Mirror Knight and like, what was it the Mirror boss called again? Like the one boss who could summon in players, and this is like the same iteration, I guess.
Now, hear me out again.
Way.
Do I think this is a good boss? No, it's fairly average in my book. I do agree having to hear that beginning section from Argo every time is pretty annoying. But I've seen this putting this guy in the top 5 worst bosses in the series. Sometimes even as high as the second worst boss in the entire series. Really? Nah. In a series where we have stuff like Bed of Chaos, Royal Rat Authority, Dragon God,
Royal Rat Authority. I died so many times to that boss because of the small summons he has. Not summons, small rats. Red dogs or something like that. Yeah, like I didn't know how to encounter that boss. Like I tried range combat, I tried everything, and I guess someday I just got lucky and defeated it, but I never want to do that shit again, man.
Ancient Wyvern, Ancient Dragon, Capra Demon, Gank Squad, Ludden Zalan. There's other examples as well. But you're telling me this boss is worse than almost all of those. Again, I don't think this is amazing by any stretch. It's kind of like a much less tedious version of Gank Squad, but it was a decent fight from my experience. Didn't find it anywhere near as horrible as commentary online I've seen. As for Overrated,
it felt too easy.
It was a bit of a struggle to think of a boss for this one. After some thought, maybe I'd pick Champion Gundyr. He's a pretty decent boss, but I don't think he's incredible compared to the rest of the bosses in the later game. You could also make this fight a bit of a joke with parrying, but I don't know if it's perhaps unfair to mark him down for that. I guess his moveset's just kind of basic for me. It's not bad by any stretch, still a fun boss, but I wouldn't rank it.
I loved the boss fight, like I was completely relying on rolling, and that's it. You need to get into a specific rhythm to finish him off, it's perfect.
In the upper echelons of Dark Souls 3 bosses. So, onto Sekiro, and this was probably the most difficult one to choose out of all the games. For underrated, I was tempted to choose Genichiro as he's my favourite Sekiro boss, but I think it's probably a stretch to call him underrated, so I'm going to go with Lady Butterfly. When I first played Sekiro, she murdered me a lot. I think I ended up encountering her way too early. She's a tough boss for new players with a wide variety of moves, and the way she jumps around the arena makes the combat feel like a
I've never played Sekiro, but I just watched it, so I can't really give my opinion on this
one. Dance. After getting smashed a lot, I went on to the main story, and after completing Genichiro, I came back to fight her. Now that I understood the combat, it was an extremely satisfying feeling to come back and defeat this tough boss that had previously crushed me to the ground to the point that it felt impossible. As for Overrated, maybe this is a cop-out, but I do tend to agree with all the bosses that are popular in Sekiro. I don't think there are any that aren't as good as people say. I will say I don't really like the Demon of Hatred. It's a bit of a polarizing boss in general. Some people either like it or hate it, but I have seen it in quite a few top 5 lists for Sekiro bosses. It's the only Sekiro boss which has kind of dodgy hitboxes here and there from stomps, and generally feels like an absolute chore to fight. It's been said before, but this boss feels like it's in the wrong game, and would be better suited to Bloodborne than Sekiro. The combat works great when it's one-on-one sword fight with a human enemy, but tends not to work as well when it's a giant monster like Demon of Hatred here. And now, onto Elden Ring. For Overrated, a lot of people seem to love Malekith, and I have to say, he just doesn't do it for me. I think it's mostly because of the first phase. I kind of wish the whole fight was just Malekith, but the Beast Clergyman phase is pretty annoying, with some rapid fast attacks that are near impossible to dodge. Once you actually do get through to Malekith, he tends to go down very quickly with the tiny health pool that he's got.
Yeah, he does a shit ton of damage, but we could nearly one-shot that dude. Like, it took me like 5 special attacks with skill attacks with like, what was it, Blasphemous Sword, yeah, and it brought that beast down with ease.
It doesn't make for an epic fight, which I think he deserves. In a game where many bosses have monster health bars, this is the one boss I think that could have done with a bit more longevity. I do love his design and aesthetic, but just wish I could have a longer, more epic battle with him. As for underrated, I actually think Godric deserves some more love here. He has a really cool design, and I think is pretty much the perfect first demigod fight. I like that his attacks can be pretty intense to deal with, but not to the point where it feels unfair. Plus, the mid-fight cutscene is awesome. He sticks a frigging dragon's head onto his arm and starts spewing fire. That is amazing. Phase 2 really builds upon what you've seen so far in Phase 1, with additional damage and range on some attacks. The only downside to this fight is this arena where sometimes you get stuck on the tombstones, but otherwise, I think this fight definitely
it felt pretty open, and if you're not a fucking idiot, you won't get stuck on those tombstones, man.
Deserves a bit more love. Well, those are my choices. But what about you? What popular bosses do you dislike, or unpopular bosses or underappreciated bosses do you champion across the Souls series? Let me know in the comments below, and of course, hit that subscribe button to let me know you've enjoyed the content. There's also a couple more videos on the screen that you might like if you haven't checked them out already. Have a good one. and see you next time.
Okay, that was it. I'm gonna react to the other ones as well, but yeah, it will take a bit of time. Like this list, there's some points where I just don't understand the blue one here, like Smelter Demon. I just don't get it. Like I just had such a simple experience with that boss. Like I can't really relate with this one, but yeah. Well, you can agree, maybe you disagree. I don't know, man. Would really appreciate some support, cause the channel is growing a bit, reviews are growing a bit, and I'm a bit satisfied. But I would really appreciate much more support. Okay, it's going decently, and support this guy as well. Like, he is a small dude, does great videos. He actually puts in effort, not like not like me. And yeah, I guess I know you what. I know. Bro, I can't speak. I know. You know. Exactly. You know what to do. I guess see you next time. Wafer out. Man, I don't know what is going on today.